I'm Dana, and a little while ago I made a video that will be linked here all about a guy that just massively manipulated me into being his friend and into some situations I wasn't really comfortable with, because I felt bad for him, and he knew that, and he played into that and made it a thing essentially. And more recently I got a couple of messages from people on Twitter letting me know that the exact same thing had happened with somebody else on TikTok, and they were just like sort of being like, hope you're not involved in that too. And I was like, thankfully this time I'm not, but it is something that kind of feels like it keeps happening to me. So I wanted to take a video today to talk about some of the ways that I feel other autistic people manipulate other autistic people. As always, this is all based on my experience and my thoughts. I'm not a trained anything, I am not educated in anything. This is just me being like, yo, I reckon this. And it's also a little bit of a reminder that, like, in any community, within, in any group of people, some people are assholes. Like, it does not matter what group of people you go to, some of them are nice and some of them aren't. And that's the exact same within the autistic community. I haven't looked up statistics that may exist, but I don't think you're any more or less likely to be manipulated by an autistic person than you are anybody else. If anything, I would probably personally argue I think it's less likely, but that doesn't make it impossible, and I think it really fucking sucks when it happens. Like, obviously being manipulated by anybody for anybody really sucks. But for reasons that we're going to get into now, I want to specifically talk about autistic manipulators. So the first thing for me is a massive sense of false security, and I probably would personally argue that some degree of it is my own naivety and my own sort of constant hope to believe everybody has the best of intentions and people don't mean to be rude or mean or nasty or anything, But some of it is also from the fact of, in my experience and from the life that I've led, I tend to get on best with other autistic people. It's other autistic people that I tend to be able to see myself in, and I recognise my own communication patterns and my own behaviour, and I feel very, very comfortable around most other autistic people in my experience. And I do feel like the autistic people that have manipulated me and abused me and everything else have been people that have really used that to their advantage and been able to really push the oh, we're the same, our brains work the same, we think the same, we have the same intentions, we have the same thought patterns, we have similar brains, we're basically the same person, this is the best thing ever. Somebody finally completely understands me because they're just like me. Or are they? It feels like you're very safe and you can be entirely understood and everything's gonna work out because this other person's just like you. And they just massively use it to their own advantage, and in my experience, it's one of those things where I've talked about this to other autistic friends where it's been very, very similar, where we've both been like, oh my god, yeah, I do that too, and we've related over it and it's been really lovely. But I've found that with people who are trying to manipulate me for reasons, they push it a lot more, and it's not the case of it'll come up in conversation where I'm like, oh, my brain works in this way, and they're like, oh my god, my brain works in this way, do you do this? And I'm like, yes, I do that, do you do this? It's not that kind of thing, it's the thing that they will bring up intentionally to be like, oh my god, we are so similar, our brains work in the same way. And that's something I've had quite a few people say to me that I then figured out weren't the best people, is our brains are the same. And are they? But along with the false sense of security, it also gives the false relatability, because obviously they're not like me. I wouldn't treat people in the ways that these people have treated me. I wouldn't behave in those ways. I wouldn't speak like that to people. I wouldn't speak like that about people. We're not the same. We don't have the same brain. We clearly our thinking patterns are not the same, because you're acting and doing things that I would find completely unacceptable. And it's one of those things that afterwards has always left me questioning, am I just like them? Are our brains the same? Am I not the person that I think I am? Because I've been very vulnerable and upfront and honest with these people that have said they feel the same and they're the same and we are the same person near enough, And all of a sudden they're doing things that I think are really horrible and shitty and unacceptable and things that you should not do to other people. Am I like that? Just because I choose not to do those things doesn't mean that I don't do other things that I don't notice and don't recognise that are really shitty. And it really sends me and worries me every single time anything like this happens. Which brings me to my next point, which is that they're autistic too. And every single person that I've had that I've felt manipulated by, and then later have been like, oh, that's because they were manipulating me, at some point they've brought up well, I'm autistic too, I'm a vulnerable person too, so why are you doing this to me? And in these situations it's been I'm asking you why you are horrible to me, or why you did something really awful, or why you're manipulating me. And they're like, I'm vulnerable, why are you upsetting me? But in other situations, it has been really difficult for me to be able to tell and like fully accept and process and be sure that I was the one being manipulated and that I hadn't done something wrong to someone or hadn't just made it up in my head. Because there is the whole thing of like, they're autistic too. Maybe they didn't mean to like communicate this thing. Maybe this social cue that I've picked up is one that they've just like adopted as part of their mask that they don't really understand and they didn't mean it in that way. You know, I'm autistic. Maybe I just misread what they're doing anyway. But also, they have just as much of like a leg to stand on with that excuse as I do, and to be like, well, I'm autistic and I'm vulnerable and I didn't know that was coming across like that. I didn't mean it like this. You've taken it the wrong way. I didn't mean it like that. I have the best of intentions because we've already talked about how we're the same person. And they've always managed to twist it around and make me question if I'm being ableist, if I'm like actually manipulating the situation, if I'm being cruel in some way to another vulnerable person, you know? But the main thing I've learned in regards to that is that people behave in, like, people always have a reason for the things that they do and the ways that they behave. You know, it can be a very small, simple reason, like, I felt like it and I didn't care about the consequences, but everybody always has a reason for the things that they're doing. So when they're manipulating you or whatever else, of course they have a reason, you know? And a lot of the time, it's other autistic people, which means that they've probably been very isolated, they've probably been traumatised, they probably have a history very similar to mine. So it's very, very easy for me to rationalise it and be like, well, they experienced this and they went through this, so they must be feeling like this, and that's why they did this thing. And since I have the understanding of like their neurotype or their mental health issue or whatever else, to be able to understand that it was due to that like this thing has happened or they behaved in this way, then it feels ableist to me to not forgive them, or like perhaps not even forgive them so much as like completely overlook whatever bad thing they've done, because is it really their fault? And it's one of those things where I'm consistently reminding myself, yeah, it is. You know, I'm also autistic, I'm also someone who's experienced mental health issues, and there's been a lot of times that I have horrible thoughts about like nasty things I'd like to do to people, ways that I could manipulate situations to get what I want. And I decide to not do those things because it's not the right way to go about things. And one of the most difficult parts for me when these types of situations happen is that manipulators tend to manipulate a lot of people. You know, in the situation that I made a video about, I feel like I got very, very lucky in being added into the chat full of different people that had communicated with the person that was doing the manipulating, because I had that support system and that like confirmation and validation on what had happened, and that, you know, I don't feel like I need to go into that too much. But in other situations, I've had it where the group hasn't been joined like that, you know, the group hasn't come together and been like, oh, the same thing's happening to everyone. The group's been manipulated by the person to like all remain on their own little sides, and they don't necessarily all know what's going on because they're all being manipulated. And that's where I've had some of like the most horrible experiences in my life. Because once you start to stand up to them in any way, or don't allow them to manipulate you or start setting boundaries, then suddenly you have a whole group of people that have turned on you. And a lot of the time, I haven't known fully why. Like one of the friendship groups that I had in my teen years, I'd come in way after they'd all met each other. And I was very quickly like, yo, this one person in the group kind of seems like none of you look forward to seeing her. None of you are excited to see her. When she's not in the group, you all bitch and moan and whinge about her and literally don't even seem to like her. And she also seems to try to manipulate us all to get us to all argue amongst each other. So why don't we just not have her in the group? And that just got back to her, and then she manipulated everyone to be like, Dana's a bitch for trying to kick me out of the group. And it's one of those things where it's like, I guess, yeah, kinda. But also nobody really seemed to want to spend time with you or be around you. You know, and I've made a whole video about how I will be the person to like say the thing that needs to be said. So eventually it got to the point where I was like, I don't want to be around her. I don't like hanging out with her. Like, you lot can do what you want, but I don't think I want to do it anymore. And they were all sort of like, yeah, I don't know. And then next thing I knew, I was the world's worst friend to have ever existed. I was an absolute bitch and I was trying to steal all of her friends. And I was like, no, I just don't want to be your friend. But that was a whole thing. And it is the thing of like, Manipulators often don't just do it to one person, they probably do it to everybody in their lives that they're able to do it to, you know? They probably have people in their lives specifically because they are able to manipulate those people. They will often have like entire friendship groups where everybody is very vulnerable, you know? So it can be very, very difficult to like pull out of the situation or set any sort of boundary when suddenly you're the fucking pariah of the group and no one wants to socialise with you anymore. Or even better, when it's twisted around to make it look like you've done something that you literally never did, or did something with really horrible intentions when you did not have any sort of intentions because you didn't even realise it was a whole thing. So I don't want this to be a massively long video because it's frankly just a very heavy topic, and I had a whole thing very, very recently that I'm not going into online that really deeply emotionally upset me that involved this type of thing, which is why I want to like talk about it and bring some degree of awareness, but I also just don't have the mental capacity to do long deep dive type videos, you know? And it's because of that that I feel like my advice kind of sucks, because I'm very like, I've gotten to a point where I've had this happen to me like 6 times maybe with various people, and I'm very much at the point of like, I don't care, I will be the pariah of the group, I will lose the entire group, I will be on my own. It's not worth being manipulated to have somebody in your life. Like, I cut off my own mother for it, I'm not taking it from random. Is it a healthy way of going about it? No, probably not. Am I slightly scared that I will eventually lose good friends because I'm so traumatised by having had this happen multiple times with people I deeply trusted, and I'm now like dealing with all sorts of like little like trust issues and feeling like I can't ever trust anybody that I meet ever again, and that only like the 3 people that are already in my life that I already deeply trust are ever going to be like safe people to me that I know won't manipulate me or try to make me do things for them or just be generally horrible people or have ulterior motives to our friendship. I have a lot of issues with people at the minute because people keep being shitty. And the situation that I've had recently, I increasingly really do want to talk about online because it's really fucking gross and horrible and annoying, and it really like is just a bit insane. But I also want to like not make it worse by talking about it online to a audience, you know? And I'm also pretty sure the person it happened with still watching my videos like a little creep. So I'm also going to quickly acknowledge that obviously manipulation is often part of abuse. If you've noticed that someone's manipulating you, they are probably abusing you in other ways as well. It's something that I had to learn the fucking hard way after an 8-year relationship with a man that manipulated and abused me for the whole fucking thing. So, you know, I know how incredibly easy it is to just write things off and be like, no, it's not like that. Please look after yourself. Please be smart about things. Please don't take it the way that I haven't stopped trusting anybody ever. But yes, that was the video. As always, you can follow me on TikTok and Instagram and Twitter. They'll all be linked down below. You can also donate to me by becoming a YouTube member, a Patreon member, or going to my Ko-fi, which will also all be linked down below. And for now, I hope that whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you're having a lovely morning, evening, day, afternoon, week, month, year, and I will see you again in a couple of days.